Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
I got a male down the middle street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us again on another Project Cold Case Facebook Live. We've been doing these the last few weeks as another way to raise awareness for some of the cases that we have featured here at our office and on our website. Trying to fill these hours with something of interest to a wide range of people. You know, some weeks it'll be a specific case, some weeks it will be a specific topic that maybe we get a lot of questions on. But kind of getting into this, we felt it was an appropriate time to bring in the lead advocate here at Project Cold Case, Patti Lord, who, if you have ever called our office or been by our office or had anything to do with us in those ways, in person or by phone, then you've talked to Patti and you know who she is. But you may not know her backstory and how we ended up here. So first of all, thanks, Patti, for being willing to sit here in front of the camera and talk a little bit and tell us about your story.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm usually on the other side of this.
Yeah, Patti's usually hard at work while we're doing these. She's really the backbone of the advocacy part of Project Cold Case. So she's dealing with survivors regularly. She's dealing with law enforcement agencies. She's handling the case submission forms and vetting those and making sure that we get pictures of those victims to go on our website. So she's always working hard, and she's rarely talks about herself or how she ended up in this role. And we thought today would be a good day to talk a little bit about that and shine some light on maybe some misconceptions that people have about being a survivor, and specifically when your loved one's case is featured on a national television show. You know what that's like, really to live through that and to see your loved one on TV on the big screen. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to give kind of the backstory of how we met first, because you have been a part of Project Cold Case since before we had a name, since before we were incorporated. Right. When we were just an idea, you were at the table, and so kind of to give the backstory on that. I've mentioned before in some of these that I worked for another organization prior to this, Compassionate Families, and we would we helped families that had lost loved ones to homicide. Didn't have to be unsolved; it could be any case, but it was limited kind of to the Northeast Florida area, and we helped a young woman and with her case, and she ended up being a front page news story about her journey, and you saw that article.
That's how I found out about it. That was a big turning point for me, because for 8 years I didn't have anyone to turn to for support, because Carrie was murdered in Virginia.
Carrie's your daughter.
Carrie's my daughter. She was 28 when she was murdered, and so organizations here didn't know about her murder. So I didn't know who to reach out to.
Right. So Carrie was murdered in 2004.
2004.
In Isle of Wight, Virginia, or she was found in Isle of Wight, Virginia.
Right.
You were dealing with a law enforcement agency that was out of town.
Yes, out of state.
Out of state, 600 miles away. You were here, and you didn't really have he didn't know anybody else that had been affected by
No.
murder or homicide at that point, and you
No.
didn't really have anybody to turn to kind of just talk about the grief process and the natural struggles with a very unnatural death, and a very traumatic experience. So for 8 years, you basically just coped with it on your own.
I did. I did.
Without any formal support other than
Right.
your immediate family. And
Exactly.
So one of the things we promote here is peer support meetings. We hold them monthly. We've got one coming up Thursday night, and a big reason for that is because I personally was benefited from support meetings when I
Me
was
too.
dealing with the grief, and you did as well. So it's something important to us. But 6.5 years ago, you see this newspaper story, and you called the Compassionate Families office, and I answered the phone.
Right.
And immediately started telling you about some of the services we could provide, including support meetings. And so I think that was the first thing you did was come to one of our support meetings.
I did, and I was greeted by you and another two advocates. And when I walked into that room, the table was full of people sitting around talking about their loved ones and what it was like. And for the first time in 8 years, I thought, "Wow, Patti, you're not losing your mind."
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't normal for me to grieve as long as I was and to go through all the changes that I was going through. And it was a life-changing moment for me at that time.
Yeah.
So I immediately started volunteering, and that helped me tremendously. And I continued going to support meetings. Even if I didn't feel like I needed to go, I wanted to be there for other survivors
Yeah.
to help them and let them know my story and hear other people's story to help them.
Yeah.
Because not everyone knows how to reach out for help to an organization that handles this.
Right. And you bring up a really good point that if, sometimes we don't feel like we need a support meeting anymore, but we can offer something to someone else that does need a support meeting.
Exactly.
And so, sometimes we call families and we say, hey, do you want to come to a support meeting? And they'll say things like, well, I used to go to support meetings all the time, and I don't think they really benefit me anymore. I'm at a place now where they're not as necessary, and I don't feel alone, so I don't need that support
Right.
that it offers. And we always tell them, okay, well, if you change your mind, you might be able to offer that support to somebody else. We ask families that now have a solved case that used to have a cold case to come occasionally and meet with us and meet with the other families just to offer a little guidance and hope. You never know what you could say or who could be in that room that could really change their life and make them not feel alone anymore and feel like someone else cares and that they're not crazy, like you said. You start to think that there must be something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still feeling like this. I'm thinking like this, and it's been this many years. There's obviously something wrong with me.
Well,
and
the
then you
death
find
is-
out it's not true.
They're true, but the death is, so many people are so misunderstood because a homicide is a violent crime. It's violent. It's different. You are affected. Your whole world comes crashing down on you. You are so affected in so many ways.
Yeah.
And you never get over it.
Right. It's the one thing we always tend to go back to with these families is that homicide grief is different. It's traumatic. There's layers of complexity. I mean, all grief is grief, and it's tough to lose somebody. But there are added layers of complexity when it's a homicide.
Exactly.
And then when you talk about an unsolved homicide, that's just an added layer that a person has to kind of fight through in order to understand the grief and to accept it and to start to rebuild a life that will inevitably be different.
Right.
We all want it to go back to the way it was before our loved one was murdered, but that's just not the way it works. And so you have to come to terms with and embrace kind of a new world and a new life and understand that you can still have fun, you can still laugh.
Oh, definitely.
You don't have to feel guilty. You can travel, you can do fun things, you can live the life that your loved one would want you to have and the life that you had prior. But a lot of times we feel guilty doing that. And so to be in a room with people that understand that and have felt that, and that accept that it's okay for you to smile again, you know, and have fun, as a pretty powerful thing for, you know, 6 years ago, that's what, 6.5 years ago, that's how we meet.
Right.
We develop a friendship. You were volunteering at the organization, so we worked together, but we also were developing a friendship. Our families got to know each other a little bit. And as I was kind of toying with the idea of an organization, you were one of the people that I went to and asked your opinion and asked your advice, and we sat down at a table with a number of people that ended up becoming board members.
Right.
And you were one of those, because at first, I mean, we were an unfunded nonprofit. There was no salaries, there was no paid positions. It was all strictly volunteer board, and then me volunteering to do the day-to-day stuff in order to start this organization. And so it was extremely important to me that I have a survivor perspective on the board, and we put some amazing people on the board that were great in their realm of expertise, whether it was an attorney or entrepreneurs or advocates, media, but we needed somebody besides me to be able to remind them what it's like to sit on our side of the table and deal with that. And it was important that we have that perspective. So that's how you started out. And we didn't know where this was going to go.
No.
So you were strictly a volunteer. In fact, there were times where you would come watch my daughter so that I could go to a meeting.
I did this because I believed in you. I believe in what you were doing, this organization that was going to come to life. I believed in that. There is not an organization like Project Cold Case.
Yeah.
People love Project Cold Case. They love you. They love the work you've done. You've made wonderful relationships in Jacksonville and outside Jacksonville.
And it has been a team effort, because without that support of that board, without there being people that were encouraging me, that were reminding me how important this was, people like you who it was personally affecting,
right?
You know what I mean? Then it easily could have dried up and never been anything. But there were people that recognized that, and they supported this cause and reminded me and us as a board when times were tough and when it was a struggle that there was a reason why we were doing it. There was a bigger cause, and that was helping families. And we stayed focused on that. And so we started Project Cold Case in January 2015. And you were a board member, so with the idea all along that first advocate position that came up, besides myself being on the staff, was going to be you.
Right.
You had the experience. You had volunteered with organizations. You had already made contacts with a lot of survivors in and around our area. So when we were able to, we brought you on as an advocate. But in the meantime, before we had an actual position, Project Cold Case was contacted by a production company. And this was very early on in the Project Cold Case existence.
It was.
And of all the things we were doing and wanted to do, it had never crossed my mind that TV production companies would reach out to me and say, hey, we want to feature your cases, or we want to help you find resolution in these unsolved cases. I don't know why it never crossed my mind, but I was too laser focused on just the advocacy side of it. And in March 2016, I got an email from a production company that said, in part, that they were looking to find a case for season 2 of a show called Killing Fields. It was on the Discovery Channel. The production company was Sirens Media, and their goal, as they explained it to me, was to find a case in which a victim had been left out in the natural elements. The killing fields, they had this criteria. One of the criteria was that the victim be out in the elements, and that add a layer of complexity to the investigation. The family had to be willing to participate. The law enforcement agency had to be willing to participate. There was a number of hurdles that we had to overcome. The first one for me was we were very early on. We only had so many cases that had been submitted to us by families, and we only had 5 cases that matched the criteria. A 6th one I threw in there, and I tried to sneak it in, but it wasn't. It was one of our other victims, Diane Schofield. She had been murdered and found in the trunk of a car, and so I thought maybe that would be enough, to pique their interest. The other cases is as it were some cases that we've become very close with those families, and I don't even think they know that I had submitted. You didn't know at the time, but of these 5 cases, Patty's daughter was one of them that I submitted. Vera Sullivan, whose case was featured on our Action News Jax Project Cold Case segment with Lorena Inclan last year. Sherry Prather, whose case ended up being solved. I submitted her as well because she had disappeared from a bar and was found a month later in the woods. And there's another one that we also had, Kathy Boswell, who Lorena featured on Action News out in Baker County. Those cases, and I think there might have been, I can't remember, I wasn't really counting, but there might have been one more that we had submitted to them. They were all cases that had been submitted to us by families early on. And a day or two later, I got an email back from the producer, and he said, we're interested in this Carrie Singer case. Do you have contact with the family? And I didn't tell him at the time that you were a board member, but yeah, I have. I knew I had contact with the family.
I know them.
And so he asked me to ask you if it was something you would be interested in. I did. You thought about it with your family. You thought that was something you wanted to participate in.
It was.
They went to the Isle of Wight Sheriff's Office and started the ball rolling on that end of it. They agreed to participate in the show. And so very quickly, we had commitments from everybody. And we were told that, Carrie was going to was in the running with someone else. They were pitching the 2 cases, Carrie's case and another case that we didn't know about, to the Discovery Channel to be season 2 of The Killing Fields. And for those that have never watched the show, the season 1 was in Louisiana with 2 main lead detectives, Brody and Aubrey, and I'll be honest, I tried to watch one of the episodes, and when you deal with this day in and day out in real life, and you see how it affects real families, the luster wears off the TV shows a little bit, and I need, when I'm not at work, I need something away from murder and death. And,
that's not what you want to go home and look at.
Right. So I just never really finished watching it. It didn't really grab me, and it wasn't something. But at the time, our thoughts were, we get to help one of our families by putting their loved one on a national television show that will have a huge budget, that will afford private lab testing, travel. I mean, it added things that Isle of Wight never would have been able to do. The sheriff's office
they could have never done this.
No. So this seemed like a great idea, and something that was really gonna help. And we also knew, just from talking with people, that the production company wasn't going to take on Carrie's case unless they felt like, it could be solved. It could be solved. That's the unfortunate part, is these companies are looking for cases that will be solved. If it's a case with no evidence, if it's a a case that's 60 years old, 70 years old. A lot of times these production companies don't want to have anything to do with it. They want it handed to them kind of on a platter, and then they're the heroes, So there was reason for us to be excited about the show.
I truly felt like it would probably be solved from the start. I felt that it would, with everything that they could provide, that it would just be solved.
And so it was a very exciting time for us. We went, months kind of waiting for the next word, waiting to figure out, when the season was going to start shooting. It wasn't until a good bit later that we found out that they had selected the other case for season 2.
Right.
But they didn't tell anybody that.
No.
So we were all still waiting for the call that was like, okay, we're starting shooting, next month. It ended up being over a year from that initial contact with us until they actually started shooting Carrie's case in Virginia. And in the meantime, hindsight's 2020, but they went back to Louisiana and did a second season in Louisiana. So what that did was it formed a rabid fan base of people that loved Brody and Aubrey.
Yes,
Not
they did.
that loved solving cold cases.
No. They
created a fan base that really just loved watching their favorite 2 detective characters on TV. And unfortunately, that fan base turned on the show and ultimately kind of on Carrie's case because they didn't want killing fields in another city with 2 other detectives. No. They wanted their favorites back.
And they made it very clear.
And they made it very clear with comments. And when we were expecting this huge blockbuster announcement that Carrie's going to be a part of this show, that it's going to get solved, and that everybody in the world is going to have eyes on Carrie and going to care about Carrie and solving Carrie's case. And immediately it was like, I refuse to watch it. Why do I care about another
nasty
agency?
Comments?
Nasty comments. I mean, and it really reflected negatively on the people watching the show, because it became very clear. Not everybody, of course, but it became very clear that there were people that didn't care that these were real murders that were being attempted to be solved. They were selfishly just wanted to see these characters.
They lost focus on what was.
And I don't think Discovery or Sirens or anybody knew that was going to be the reaction. And your series, the Murder Isle is what they have, Killing Fields Murder Isle. They ended up with their own fan base. Eventually, people that started watching it were like, "Well, I didn't want to watch it because you left, and now I love it." And there were new fans that came on. But I want people to understand that perspective from a survivor family when you think your loved one's finally going to get the break and that the people are going to care. And then the public's reaction is, oh, I won't watch it because you're not in Louisiana anymore. It was like, we're talking about an unsolved murder. We're talking about a killer out on the loose that has done this to your daughter. And somebody doesn't want your daughter to get the same opportunities for her case being solved because it's not going to be their favorite detective doing it. And it was very emotional and it was frustrating. I mean, I remember, by this time we were working, you were an employee of Project Cold Case. We work in the same office, back to back every day. And I remember going home and reading comments and coming in the next day and being like, I hope Patti didn't see that. And then you turn into me and saying, did you see what people are saying? And it was heartbreaking. But it did start to change.
They did give Isle of Wight a chance and
some of them did
watching.
and start watching. And
became hooked and liked the
detectives. Are we gonna show the Isle of Wight clip next? Okay, yeah. Let's show. Checking in with our producer Clint here. He keeps us on track.
Yeah,
and he does all these great transitions and videos. But we're going to show you now what was kind of the promo video when they announced Killing Fields was going to be in Isle of Wight, Virginia, and that they were going to be featuring Carrie's case. Let's take a look.
When I look around Isle of Wight, Virginia, I see a perfect place to dump a body. Out here, the only one to see what you've done is God. In 2004, Isle of Wight County experienced 2 horrendous homicides.
These are violent deaths. Could the same person have committed both these crimes?
Stand by on your go. Open! Think about a cold case. It only takes one detail to crack it open. We absolutely did not have the technology that's available to us today.
From that DNA, we'll be able to tell you the ancestry of eye color, hair color, and shape of the face.
Finally, I'm gonna be able to have eyes on our killer.
This case has haunted Randy for 13 years.
Seeing what I've seen, it will eat into your damn soul.
Killing Fields Murder Isle. The investigation begins January 4th at 9, and watch live on the Discovery.
So that was the trailer. That was the promo, the exclusive promo that E.T. had, and I remember being excited to see it.
I was too, very excited.
And then when we did see it, being like, this is really happening. This is happening. Now, the show portrays that it's a real-time investigation, right. and that's a little bit misleading. It's not like what they filmed that week they air the next week, the next Thursday. They did this filming a few months prior to the 6 months, 5 months prior.
Months prior, yes, you're right.
To actually airing it. But while they were filming it, it was real time. They were investigating the case, from start to finish,
right.
Real time. Although if you ask most homicide detectives, they'll tell you that 2 months of filming, 2 months of investigating
it's
not really start to finish of any
it's not.
any homicide case. But that's the TV spin, which we unfortunately hit on a little bit more. The show airs almost exactly a year ago. I think it was at the very beginning of January 2018, right?
It was in January 2017.
18. It was this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
we were so connected with them for so long. It started in January, and we had a whole year leading up to this.
Literally like 21 months from the first moment they reached out to us to the first episode airing.
Yes. And we were excited.
They flew you up during
they flew myself and my
production.
daughter Jamie.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but other than when you were there, you never saw episode 1. They didn't share with you what they had found. In fact, you'd have conversations and they would specifically tell you, like, I can't tell you what is going to air.
Right. I didn't
You have to watch. You weren't
anything ahead of time. I saw it when everyone else saw it.
You were watching with everyone else that tuned in.
Completely unaware what was going to happen. I wasn't told anything. I was tuned in just like everyone else.
So the first episode was pretty good. I remember watching it and being like, wow, they rubbed the Hollywood on it, so to speak, and sensationalized it a little bit, but we expected that to some degree. But at the end of it, we're like, okay, this could be good, and the excitement is still there and building. Episode 2 comes out, and I remember there was it wasn't quite as good as 1 for us in our perspective, but it was like, okay. And then somebody
I got a call from a friend.
So they were releasing these, like
some of these were released after the show was aired. Then they would release the next one with the Discovery app.
Yeah, on demand with the Discovery app.
So
they didn't know. None of us knew that.
No,
but you could actually watch before it aired on Discovery. You could watch it on their on-demand Discovery app. And somebody did that. They watched episode 3 before it aired. And tell us about that phone call.
A friend of mine, after the second episode, she went in and looked at the third episode, and she called me and she said, I just looked at the next episode. I'm like, how did you do this? So once she explained it to me, I'm like, okay. I went in and looked at it, and she says, I just want you to know that you do need to look at this before next week. So I did, and was totally shocked that they had portrayed Carrie in a manner that she didn't do. They were working on another case, a case that a gentleman was murdered a couple weeks before Carrie was, and I had been told previously, before the production team ever came into this situation, that the two cases were never
they weren't connected.
They weren't connected at all. So once I found out and I saw how they were portraying Carrie, I waited a few days and I told my daughter that I did not want her to watch it. She can make her own decision, but I would let her know a little bit of what was going on. So she never watched anything after the second episode.
Yeah,
she never watched anymore.
And just to give a little bit, so 2004 in June, the end of June, a gentleman named Johnny Tynes is murdered in his trailer in Isle of Wight, Virginia.
Right.
About a week later, Carrie is murdered, and her body is found in Isle of Wight, Virginia, dumped basically in a field in Isle of Wight. Johnny Tynes has been beaten or blunt force trauma.
Right.
Carrie has been
blunt force trauma.
Blunt force trauma. So they, as any good investigator I would imagine would do, they're going to check to see if there's any connections back then in 2004.
Absolutely.
They're investigating those cases. They're checking, for any connections, whether Carrie has ever met this guy, whether she's been, been in his presence, have any mutual friends, anything like that.
And I was always told.
Well, yeah. So through the investigation, not only do they determine that they're not connected, but they identify a suspect in Johnny Tynes' case.
Yes, they did.
And they end up in 2005, within a year, making an arrest in Johnny Tynes' case, which ends up being his own son. So they end up dropping those charges in 2005. And he does not get charged or tried for the murder of his dad. But law enforcement, a lot of times we hear him say, look, that case is solved. It's not resolved. That means I know who killed Johnny Tynes, but I don't have enough evidence to prove it. And so their focus on that case shifts a little bit. Now they have a narrowed focus to try to be able to prove who killed Johnny Tynes. But they have determined that it has zero relation to Carrie Singer's murder, your daughter.
Right.
So that's back in 2004 and 5.
Right.
In the TV show, they set it up a little bit differently.
They did. They made it look as though Carrie was involved with Johnny Tynes, and that she, was doing things that
she wasn't doing. They're implying she was in places she wasn't, with people she wasn't, doing things she wasn't.
And, I wasn't even told that this was going to be brought up.
Right.
So
You had a friend call you and tell
I-
you that you need to watch this next episode
Yeah.
before everybody else does, because you're going to start getting calls, questions, and you're going to lose some sympathy of people that don't know, this case. They're going to see Carrie in a light that is, is not who she was.
Exactly. I mean, Carrie had her problems, and Carrie didn't do the things that were told.
Right.
And I was always told that there was no connection. So when this took place, I mean, and not even telling me, it was just.
It went from kind of bad to worse. So so Carrie moved to Virginia. She only lived there for 6 months.
She did. She moved from Jacksonville to Virginia. She had met a man, and his hometown was there where they moved to. He was here on base, one of the bases, Mayport,
Naval base, working.
doing some work as a civilian. Carrie had been struggled for on and off for several years with some addiction problems, and I believe that she did move to Virginia to straighten,
In part to get a fresh start.
Yeah, because staying in Jacksonville, she probably didn't feel like she could do that.
Right.
So she did attempt to try to make a fresh start. She enrolled in college, so she was trying to get her life back on track.
Right. So she
only lived there 6 months.
She only lived there 6 months. It's not like she had this huge network of friends and even acquaintances.
No, she didn't know people.
Yeah. Did she have a job up there?
No, she
was going to school. So she was home and getting ready for to go enroll at school, or had enrolled and was getting ready to start at school.
She had already started because she had her books and stuff. She had told me.
So now fast forward again to the show, and they are investigating Johnny Tynes' murder now along with Carrie's, because they think they have found this nexus, this connection. Johnny Tynes' son comes forward, or somebody comes forward and says that there was a white girl around the house sometime. So they start looking at connections again, even though for years they have told you that these cases are not connected, and they know they're not connected. They are pulling out evidence in the Johnny Tynes case, which is a comforter or a sheet or something that was on a bed, and there's blood on this. I think it was a comforter, but whatever it was, and they notice a void in the blood, and what that means is there was something there, someone, and so they, in that episode, implying that Carrie was in that bed with Johnny Tynes when Johnny Tynes is murdered, and that this is the link to how she ends up murdered a week or so later, because she knows who did this, and she may come forward, and that's what they're going to do. Wonderful fictional TV. I mean, a great novel, a great story that has no basis in fact, and quite honestly re-victimizes Carrie and her family.
Exactly.
And then to add to that they had not even had the courtesy, no one had the courtesy to call you and prepare you for what they were going to leave that episode, leave the viewers thinking and feeling. You shared enough of that with your other daughter that she just simply refused to watch another episode again. And I can tell you this, if you do anything, provide a service or a product, and one of the family members of the person you're showing, you're trying to get justice for, refuses to watch the show anymore,
it's not a good thing.
That's not a good sign for your television show. But you stayed quiet.
I did.
We didn't say anything publicly. I'm trying to remember if you called them to ask. I think you called them to say, like, are you telling me that now there is a connection? Like, for years you have told me, that there is not a connection. For 13 years you have said there's no connection. Now
And they told me,
And they said,
well, you knew that there wasn't a connection.
right.
So as long as you knew,
Right.
there shouldn't be a problem.
They didn't feel the need to call you and tell you give you a heads up because there was never a connection. This was all for show.
But no
This
one
was
else
all-
knew this. This
right.
was
This was all
I knew.
for show, but it portrayed Carrie in a light that, for the sole benefit of keeping viewers and watching viewers. I don't know if we explained it. The Killing Fields was not a 1 hour episode that featured
No.
Carrie. This was a 8 episode season that Carrie was supposed to be the focus of the entire season in
Right.
solving her case. 8 1 hour episodes, and they did the first 2, and they brought Johnny Times into the mix. Then they kind of shifted focus on Johnny for a little while, and to give the show, I guess, some credit, they followed up on that investigation. They do eventually identify the individual that was in bed with Johnny Tynes. It was not Carrie.
No, it
there was
wasn't.
never any evidence or proof that it was her. But for TV purposes,
They let people-
they let people believe that for an entire week. That's how the show ended, and then they don't go in and clear everything up for another episode or two.
Right. They didn't clear it up the following episode.
Yeah. So that was another thing that they end up solving Johnny Tynes' murder on the show. They arrest his son. Now they don't say again. They never say in the show that they had arrested him in 2005 and released him and that he was always the suspect. They didn't have enough proof. Anybody that's seen the show knows that Johnny Tynes, the victim, was in bed with his daughter-in-law, and his
Yes.
son walked in
Yes.
and found them in bed together. And the daughter-in-law, after years, was willing to testify against her ex-husband now at the time. And so they made the arrest in that case. And it had nothing to do with Carrie. It was never connected to Carrie.
No.
But now, since that episode, they have dropped the charges again.
But the harm was already done.
Well, the harm was already done, and now they've dropped the charges again on that case.
Because she can't come forward.
Because she's in fear, which we understand. And
she's
but the way that whole thing played out was very traumatic for your family. I mean, you had family. I remember you telling me, like, people calling you and wanting to know what the heck was going on. Why are they showing this stuff? Is this true?
Exactly.
You never told me, Patti, you never told me that Carrie was doing this or was with that, and you're trying to now, while you're in the midst of watching this unfold on TV with the rest of the world, now you've got to explain things that didn't happen, but hey, they're on TV, so they must be true, right?
It was terrible. It was terrible for people to call me. First of all, it was horrible to see that. Thank goodness for that person who called me and let me know. Oh my gosh!
I don't know who that person is, but I want to hug them every time I think about that situation.
I am so thankful for her.
If you ever find yourself in a position where you don't know if you should tell somebody that they're about to be blindsided with horrible news, let them know. It's going to be bad. They may not at that moment realize, what service you're providing them, but whoever that person was, I mean, they deserve all the credit in the world, because that had to be a tough phone call. Do I call Patti and tell her that they're about to destroy her daughter's reputation on TV, all for the sake of
I know,
viewers?
How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that? But she's a very strong woman and did it and thinks highly of our family and did it for us, and thank God. That's all I can say. But when I did watch it, it was just horrible. It was just like Carrie was victimized once again. My whole world it felt like going back to this all over again.
Yeah. And I, this is not about me in any way, but I felt so guilty for putting you and your family in this position. And obviously, and at the time we made the best decision we could with the information that we had.
Absolutely.
And we honestly thought that this was going to be a great thing for your family. And if we had, ever known that it was going to take this turn.
Yeah, I've always told you, no, do not feel that way. I don't blame you at all. How would we know? But I'm glad I did it, even though it was horribly hurtful, because now if any other families need us for this situation,
and
it won't happen to anyone else that we know.
And we've already been down that road.
We did it
we're very, very cautious. I got an email last night, a LinkedIn message from a producer from another investigation discovery television show, asking us to help them out. And she describes a little bit about the show and what they're looking for, and I thought, given what we thought was a good show and what turned out to be, there's no way in the world I would stick one of our families in the middle of this mess. There was nothing I could see good from, and it's not Killing Fields is a different show, but the way they described it, I thought, no, I would never put a family through that with this. It's just set up to fail.
So yes, as bad as it was, I am thankful that there's already been good out of it. We've already helped a family. Yeah. And a lot of stuff was done during the investigation that wouldn't have been done, as we talked about. There was funding that would not have been available to that sheriff's office. That they were able to use private labs for state-of-the-art technological DNA testing. They were able to identify DNA that they had not previously. Now, they have had DNA for years, but they were able to identify another piece of DNA. Right. They spent money, and they did tests that the sheriff's department would have never been able to do.
So there was good. You have a personal relationship with the original detective, Randy Patrick, who has, from conversations with you, has always treated you with the utmost respect, has always been caring and compassionate and understanding as can be for somebody who hasn't experienced it himself. He's always returned your calls. He's always, answered your questions, no matter how tough they were for him to answer.
Yeah, he always stayed in touch with me from day one. He was the original investigator on Carrie's case, and he was wonderful. Yeah. I mean, he would call me back if he wasn't there, if I left a message. He was just wonderful. And this was the one case that haunted him. Yeah. This is the one case he always wanted to get solved.
And we talked about that, the long gap between when they approached us, when they said they were going to do it, and when it actually happened. He was set to retire, and they kept him on for a few more months.
For the
show. And then when nobody ever heard back from the production company, he ended up retiring. And then when they showed back up out of the blue months and months later, he came back from retirement, literally just
because of
reinvestigate Carrie's case
and to help our family.
And so, we're talking about the bad, but there's the good. There's the good of what they tried to do. There's the good of what we learned, and there was a familiar face on that show that you didn't always know had Carrie's best interest in what he was doing. So we don't want to, I don't want people to think you weren't appreciative of what they were doing and all of that stuff.
No, I was very appreciative to everything that the sheriff's department's done. They've investigated Carrie's case to the best of their ability.
Right.
I believe that Carrie's case has been exhausted. Everything by doing this show, all the new DNA technology and everything that was done for Carrie's case is amazing. I'm forever grateful for that. Sure. I've told each one of them that I'm forever grateful for everything that they did.
And there was all the things they did, and then there was these few things that they really didn't do that they don't understand. We deal with this a lot. This is why victim advocates have a role in the judicial process and in the law enforcement process, because there should have been an advocate that was assigned to. It really should have been part of the production company, but a victim advocate that kept you in the loop, that told you things, and there should have been one with the sheriff's office that kind of kept them in line on what to do and not do.
Exactly.
When you were up there, they were filming, and you and your other daughter went up there, and they sat y'all down at a conference table, and they told you something that very few people know.
They did. They were very excited to tell Jamie and myself that they were very close to making an arrest, that they felt very confident that they had the person that murdered Carrie, that they had gotten some DNA, and that's what they were waiting on. They had a picture of this man that they showed us. They gave us a little history of the man, where he worked, what he did, how he knew Bobby, Carrie's boyfriend.
Right.
And so there was the connection.
Were the cameras rolling? Was the production company in there at the table?
Yes, there was always a camera on.
So they were filming this as they show you a man, and they tell you, this is the man that murdered Carrie.
This is the man that murdered Carrie.
And we're waiting on some DNA testing to come back, and then we're going to arrest him.
Right. It'll be a few weeks.
you had said a few things like, well, if you make the arrest.
And they would correct me and say, no, when we make the arrest, we've got this person. So they also took us into the sheriff's office.
With the sheriff.
With the sheriff. And he did the same thing. We have the person. There's no doubt in our mind this is the person. So
you came home from Virginia, and I remember,
I called you.
You called me, and then when we saw each other,
I was so, I can't even explain.
Yeah,
the excitement and all these years of waiting, and now we have the person. Finally, we have the person. Carrie will finally get the justice that she deserves. This person will be taken off the street where he can't do this to anyone else. They told me the day that they were going to call me. I didn't hear anything. I called the lieutenant. I didn't get an answer. I left a message. Nothing the next day. I left another message the following day, the third day. Nothing. So finally, I was on my way home from work, and I got the phone call. I was on the interstate. So I pull off the exit because I'm like, I know this isn't good because he hasn't called me.
Right.
And this is 3 days later than he was supposed to call me. So I pulled off and was told that it wasn't this person.
The DNA didn't match.
Did not
He's
match.
not Carrie's killer.
So I went from, this just gives me chills because I was so ecstatic. I can't even tell you how we just knew it was him because we were led to believe that they had the person to knocked off your feet, completely taken back that this isn't the person.
That
So
obviously
I don't
didn't
think-
make it into the show either.
No,
That
it didn't.
didn't make it.
And with me talking with other sheriff's departments, it doesn't sound like this is something that they should have done. No. You don't tell a family this kind of information without having that DNA in.
Right.
You don't give them false hope.
Right.
I was given such, not just myself, it was Jamie and I.
Right. Your other daughter.
So I had to go home and tell my husband, and then I had to go to Jamie's house and sit her down and tell her this. I mean, it affected me tremendously. It was just, it was horrible.
It's not something that should have ever happened.
It should have never happened.
If anybody had put you guys in the priority list that you should have been, you would have had somebody there, with you. They would have never, the sheriff's office, if I walk down the street here to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and actually I did this, I've talked to multiple detectives within multiple agencies about what happened to you that time. And I mean, each of them say, this is why we don't do that. This is why we don't call a family when we get something that looks like a really good lead and it starts leading us in a direction where we think we might actually be able to make an arrest. Of course we want to call the families and let them know that. But we don't and we can't for that exact reason, that if it doesn't end up in an arrest, if we don't end up with justice, then we have just, what they have done to that family, what they did to you. You've done so much harm.
And you can't take it away.
And it started to, as the show, again, they didn't air that, obviously.
No.
But as there were other telling signs in the show that I talk about the billboard. When you,
yes.
Not long after Carrie was murdered, you paid for a billboard to go up.
I did.
And this is a clip of that billboard from a newspaper clipping up there when it happened. And how long ago after Carrie was murdered? Is this like a year later? Less than a year?
Within a year.
Within a year. You called this billboard company and you asked them how much it would cost to place a billboard.
And he gave it to me so cheap.
Yeah, and he wanted to help you, so he let you do it. So what I want people to realize here is I want people to look at that picture of Carrie. This is Carrie as she was when she left Jacksonville and moved to Virginia. That's what she looked like. This image is from like they're showing her.
No,
they knew her. They had anybody that met her up there met her as that image that you saw from the newspaper clipping, and so your focus all along was if somebody in Virginia has information on a murder, they're not going to look at that image and put the two together, or potentially not put the two together
because they've never seen that person.
They've never seen that person. So those things started, and you actually questioned them on that, and what was their response? I mean,
I had to go. I didn't get a call back from the sheriff's department about it, so I got a hold of a person that works in the production team that was kind of assigned to me, but she was only assigned to me to furnish them with photos, with contracts, or send this or send information back and forth to them. So I didn't get any advocacy, anything like that. But when I talked to this person, I said, I don't want that person, that photo used on the billboard. That's not what Carrie looked like. And she just said, I'm sorry, but that's what the sheriff's department decided to use.
And we're going to go through some pictures here of Carrie. I mean, we want people to know, to see the real Carrie. They saw whatever they saw on that television show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They saw a production company's version of an individual.
Right.
And take us through, some of these pictures. They're going to be on a slideshow, so they're going kind of fast, but I mean,
look at the smile. She was such a, she was, that's
she's
with her
with
little
Jamie,
sister.
yeah.
That's Jamie. They were having a day of makeup. That's Carrie.
That's the image they used
That's
in the
the
billboard.
image they used.
There's Carrie more as she was towards
That's how she was.
the time of her murder.
Right. We were very thankful for her. She and Bobby flew to Jacksonville a couple weeks before she was murdered, a month, I guess, and spent some time with us. And that was a picture of us at the beach. That was just showed. And there's Jamie, and there's Jamie and I. But she loved animals.
Yeah.
She had a huge, huge love for animals, and that's a school picture, kindergarten, and that's her at Christmas time
opening up a gift.
But
I mean,
those are the memories I want to remember.
Right.
But that's not what she looked like. So how is this going to help her case?
Right. It became very apparent that they weren't so much concerned about somebody coming forward with information as they were concerned about more people watching and continuing to watch, because here was this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful young woman that had been murdered, which she was, all of those things.
She was.
But it showed a complete lack of interest in, getting help from people around that area, because you're showing a picture of someone that no one there has ever seen.
Right.
So those were just, those are just a few of kind of the issues that we dealt with, and then as the show wrapped up, and we were in very different places how we felt from when the season began. We were still working together. We'd come in every day after the episode aired, and we'd talk about it and kind of vent about it. But I was so impressed with how you kept that stuff. Not that you kept it in, but that you kept it private. We had conversations about it. You had conversations with your family about it, but you didn't run right out and bash everybody.
No.
At the end of the day, there were people involved that were trying to help and trying to solve Carrie's case.
There were, and I'm grateful for that. And I don't want to go around bashing people, but
there were some mistakes made.
There was a lot of mistakes that were made,
and we tried to reach out and maybe offer some suggestions for the future for these cases, and quite honestly, we were met with just a lack of caring. I mean, they at that point, especially because everything was over, I didn't really want to have anything to do with us, at least Project Cold Case, anymore. And they had moved on, from what I would call possibly some constructive criticism. When you're dealing with victims' families, you need to have an advocate there to be that liaison, and they just they didn't want to hear that. They had moved on. Our understanding is that both the production company and Discovery have gone through some changes, and they may or may not do another season of The Killing Fields. Won't get another one from us, I can tell you that.
But I've heard that the Sheriff's Department, a couple of the detectives, are doing another show through Discovery.
Show. Yeah.
So
hey, what was not good for Carrie may have been good for some other people, in other ways. I don't know if that's really a good thing or not, but
no, it's not.
But they're gonna, other people will benefit where Carrie did not. Yeah, and I think we always believed that the focus of this was to benefit Carrie and no one else. And it didn't really end up that way.
Work. I do have another thing I do need to say before we end this, and you're not aware of this, but another thing that they did was, I think the first Sheriff's Department did this when Killing Fields was there. They had T-shirts made.
All right.
Isle of Wight had T-shirts made.
All right.
With Carrie's name on it and Justice for Carrie, so forth. And they sold these T-shirts, and I believe they had other items too that they sold. Well, they were supposed to, I was never told about that. I saw that on Facebook, but they told Facebook viewers that they were going to pick a charity for this, for the money, the funds to go to. So they were going to let me pick. So I never heard from them. So I called one day and I'm like, okay, I hear that I get to pick a charity and I would like to pick Project Cold Case. So back in April, I contacted them and spoke to them on the phone, and they said, oh, well, I think we might have some more t-shirts being made. So just recently I sent an email asking, you know, were you going to give the funds to Project Cold Case? Because right is right and wrong is wrong. And I'm very upset that they promised they made another promise that they didn't, you know, keep their word on.
Yeah.
And it's very upsetting because nonprofits, you know, if someone wants to donate, that's a big thing.
Yeah, it's
And-
certainly
and
not,
to
doesn't
say-
look good if you tell people you're going to donate
Exactly.
proceeds to a charity and then you never make that
And
donation.
to say it on Facebook that, you know, that this is going to go to an organization, Project Cold Case, that helps families of unsolved homicide, and nothing's done, and I've contacted them twice.
Yeah.
So that doesn't settle with me.
Yeah, that's
very well
it
either,
doesn't
because
reflect well on them at all.
No, it doesn't. And I really kept a very good rapport from day one with the detective. I always stayed in contact with the sheriff's office in Virginia, so that Carrie would never be forgotten, and I continued to be her voice.
Yeah.
And Jamie has come in. My younger daughter has joined me, trying to do this as well. And you know, I believe that they did do as much as they could on Carrie's case. I believe they worked on Carrie's case and worked on it hard. But I'm very, you know, disheartened and discouraged, very much so, with how they handled Killing Fields and how they handled the selling of t-shirts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that could have been prevented.
I agree with you. And I think that they had many opportunities to do the right thing and to make that right with the advocates, just communication.
Exactly.
That's a big thing. You just need to communicate.
Is
We're wrapping up here. We've gone over an hour, which is not a big deal, but people that are watching, you know, we don't want them to lose interest. And hopefully this has been insightful to you out there. Kind of go through one last clip here where after the season aired, Lorena Inclan from Action News came and did a piece with Patti.
Yes.
And talked about kind of the hope of what the season would result in. What it didn't. It didn't end in an arrest. But along the way, there was some other technology that was utilized. This phenotyping composite sketch, where they took the DNA that was on Carrie, and they created a composite rendering of a face, and you'll see that in the video, and we'll show it to you afterwards. I just want to keep in mind that technology is really amazing, and I was with Patti when they sent her over the image and said, this is the face of the man that killed your daughter. Now that face was the face of someone with that same DNA that had at average height, weight, you know, simple haircut, standard haircut. It doesn't take into account how old the person was, whether they had facial hair, whether they had long hair, short hair, bald head, scars, tattoos, glasses, none of that stuff. So, but they gave you 2 images, one of them of the individual at 25 and one at 55. And we'll play that clip from Lorena, and you'll see those composite sketches.
Patti Lord spends most of her days inside the Project Cold Case office downtown. It's here where she finds comfort working as a victim's advocate.
I enjoy really helping the survivors because I know how they feel.
It's not where she ever thought she'd be, but that changed on July 1st, 2004.
That was a horrible day.
Her 28-year-old daughter, Carrie Singer, had been found dead, her half-naked body dumped in a field, her head severely beaten.
It's hard for me to wrap my brain around someone who would do such a horrible crime.
It happened nearly 600 miles away from Jacksonville, in Isle of Wight, Virginia, where Singer had just moved 6 months before to be with her boyfriend.
She was excited. She did start school, and she was wanting to be a physical therapist.
Before she disappeared, Singer got into a fight with her boyfriend. He was ruled out as a suspect, leaving investigators to wonder who and why.
I just want justice for Carrie. It's been a long time.
But now, thanks to DNA phenotyping technology, the who is becoming more clear. Investigators released this composite of the killer. Based on DNA found at the scene, scientists were able to come up with a profile. They believe he's a Hispanic man. This is what he may have looked like at the time of the murder, and this is what he might look like now.
It's wonderful. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to see a picture of someone that murdered my daughter.
Singer's case is getting national attention after being featured on the show The Killing Fields. Now investigators are closer than ever to solving the case.
We're hoping that someone will recognize him and come forward with information about him.
While seeing the face of the man that took her daughter is a major achievement, Lord is praying for the day she'll get to see him in person.
I want to sit down in front of that person and just ask, why? Why did you do this? Why did you have to do this? There's no reason that you had to do this.
Lorena Anklan, CBS 47, Action News Jax.
All right, so that was our the segment that aired down here.
Mm-hmm.
They had a sister station up in Virginia that took some of those clips from the interview with Lorena.
They did.
And shared it up there. Again, never saying anything bad about anybody, you know, after you had just gone through all of that, watching it as it progressed throughout the season, and then ultimately not getting justice for Carrie. But we want to pull up those composite sketches because as you and I have talked over the years and the last year since all of this happened, there is still a chance these shows will be rerun. They will be aired in other places, and somewhere someone knows an individual that looks similar to that or did look like that at 25 or 55 years old and lived in and around the Isle of Wight area in Virginia in 2004. And at this point, that's kind of the last hope. As things stand right now, and I hate to say that, but because we always want there to be hope, but they did a lot of testing, and one thing, you know, another thing that we forgot to mention about the show was the very last episode. At the end, there was a scene where the detectives kicked out the cameraman, ran into a room, slammed the door, picked up the phone, and started frantically talking. As if they had received a tip at the very end of the show that was going to break the case open, and you called them.
Yes, I did, and asked, and they said, no, we don't have a tip. It was just for the show, to let people think that we had a tip, but there was no tip.
The entire show, unfortunately, there was false information given. There was you can call it artistic liberty. You can call it whatever you want, sensationalism. They modified timelines to create their own narrative. But kind of, so what we're left holding now is that Carrie's case remains unsolved, that nothing from the show, once it ended, despite that, that scene where they looked like they were finding something, all we have is this composite. If somebody out there has seen that composite, I've seen that person, come forward. That's the Isle of Wight Sheriff's Office. You can call them. They'll put you in touch with who you need to get in touch with to resolve this case. A lot of lessons learned for our organization, for me personally. I think for you personally, I think we're better advocates, unfortunately, because of what we had to deal with.
Right, I believe that.
But that helps us help other people, and so that that's what we will take from it. That's what we'll gain from it. We'll be better at our jobs. We'll be more protective of our families when these opportunities arise. When it seems like a good opportunity, you will be front and center with those families every step of the way. And we let them know ahead of time what you experience so that they're not caught off guard if something similar happens to them. Patti, this was not something easy to talk about. We have talked about doing this for a while now, and there's always a fear that if you upset the sheriff's office or you upset the investigators, that they're not going to do anything for your loved one's case, that they're just going to toss it and throw it away. Whether that's a rational fear or not, we don't know, but it's a natural fear. And you have kept quiet, and you have never said anything publicly about the trauma that you experienced and your family experienced during that show. And it was time. It was important that we let people know what you went through, because you have people come up to you and say, "Oh, I saw the show. It was amazing," or "Oh, I saw the show. Whatever happened," and they don't know the true story as to what was going on, before, during, and after.
And I believe, and you're right. I have kept quiet, and it was time to get my story out. If I can help someone else, that's my goal.
Right.
As far as the sheriff's department, I have worked hard for 14 and a half years to stay on their good side, and have had a wonderful rapport. If they want to take this the wrong way, I'm sorry.
Well, the good thing is here, we've said nothing except the truth, and they can't. It's not like we have manipulated these facts to fit our agenda. That's what the production company did, was manipulate the facts to for their agenda. And I think the sheriff's office kind of got caught up in that a little bit. My guess is that there's some people in that sheriff's office that didn't like the way they were portrayed, because they were chasing the guy, and it was a different guy every episode, and it really made them look kind of like they didn't know what they were doing, in my opinion. So I think there's probably some people in that sheriff's office that weren't exactly thrilled with the portrayal either, but they never came out and said that, and they certainly never came out and apologized to you for what you went through. So anyway, thank you for being here, and thank you for reliving that, and being our advocate and our go-to for our families. That's why you're in that chair, is because you have experienced a lot of things that most people haven't. Couple of little closing remarks here. Our website, we just did a new cold case spotlight this week of Anthony Stinson Jr., who was murdered here in Jacksonville in 2013. We've met with his dad in our office, Anthony Stinson Sr., who has done some really amazing things in the community since his son's murder to try to curb violence in Jacksonville, taking at-risk youth on field trips to Washington, D.C., helping them get jobs, just amazing stuff. That's the Anthony J. Stinson Jr. Association for Change.
Yeah.
I think is what it's called. There's a link in the story in the spotlight, and it was we shared it on Facebook yesterday. Please share those stories. That's how the information gets out there, and maybe we can get a resolution to that case as well. Support meeting, we talked about it earlier. If you're in Northeast Florida or anywhere where you want to drive to here, it's here at our office at 10 South Noonan Street, Jacksonville, Florida. That's downtown, 32202. Support meeting Monday from Thursday from 6 to 8. It's the holidays, so sometimes it can be harder. So we welcome you to come in for that. We got the next 2 weeks. We're not going to have these. A week from today is Christmas Day, and a week from that is New Year's Day. So we won't be doing these Facebook Lives for a couple of weeks. Then we'll come back in January, and we'll do some more. We'll have one in January that will be the lead up to our annual fundraiser, the 4th annual Year of Hope. We'll show off all the auction items that we've received and acknowledge the sponsors that are making that possible. So that'll be towards the end of the week before the event, the Tuesday before the event. We also received word from Melissa Nelson, the elected state attorney in the 4th Judicial Circuit. She's going to join us the first week in February for our Facebook Live, and we're going to talk a little bit about an initiative she put in place here in Duval, Nassau, and Clay counties, where she's the elected state attorney. It's a cold case initiative. Typically, state attorneys, prosecutors, district attorneys, whatever it is in your area, don't get involved in cold cases because they're not necessarily needed until an arrest is made, or a decision to make an arrest. But she has been very proactive and been a huge supporter of Project Cold Case, and recognizes the need for support in that area. And she's implemented a cold case initiative, and we're super excited to have her in to talk about that a little bit. Get your questions ready. If you have any questions during that episode, we'll be sure to answer them and ask her. Thanks for tuning in. We know this one went long today, but this was some important stuff, valuable information for our survivors. Maybe those of you that are just cold case fans may not have gotten as much out of this, but our goal is always advocacy first, and so we're here to support our families and do what we can for them. I hope you understand that. With that being said, wishing you guys some happy holidays and time off with your families and friends. Enjoy that time. Make sure that you hold those family members close. There's a lot of us out there this year that are going to have somebody not at the table, not celebrating with us, and that can be hard. So if you're one of those, know that we're thinking about you. You're always in our thoughts and prayers. And if you're one of those lucky enough to not have lost anybody and be missing them this holiday season, and make sure you hold on to the ones that are there tight. I think that's it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Great.